All right, good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? No? Okay, well that's probably a good test. Sharon, our presenter, will have a microphone, but if you guys do want to move forward, we got a lot of empty seats up front, so if you'd like to move forward, you can. So, welcome to the Emergency Preparedness and Youth Track, and it's sponsored by the Hampton Roads Regional Catastrophic Planning Team. And our first presenter today is Sharon Chamberlain. She is a senior emergency planner for the City of Chesapeake. Since her employment in October 1st, 2012, she has achieved the Virginia Department of Emergency Management Advanced Professional Series certification and furthered her knowledge in emergency management through teaching and training. She also serves on the Hampton Roads Incident Management Team. Prior to her employment with the City of Chesapeake, Ms. Chamberlain retired from the Norfolk Police Department at the rank of Assistant Chief of Police after 37 years of service and was the first patrol woman to achieve the rank of Sergeant, Lieutenant, Captain, and Assistant Chief on the Norfolk Police Department. On March 1st, 2011, she was appointed as the Norfolk Police Department Acting Chief of Police and served in this capacity until June 12, 2012. Please welcome Mrs. Sharon Chamberlain.
Who's working with this microphone? Okay, first thing I want to say is it's my honor to be with you all here today. And hopefully out of this session that we have, please be interactive. If you have some comments, there's a multitude of experience in here that we can rely on. And we're going to go through the basics. One thing, keep in mind that what I did when the doc was up is, guess what my right thumb was? Over top of the left. So that makes me anal. So we've got slides that we're going to cover pretty in a detailed manner, and you have copies of that. And when we were first discussing copies of the slides and the slides being detailed, Susan, my young boss for teaching said, Sharon, those slides are too busy, they're too detailed. I said, there's a reason for that. I go to conferences, I go to seminars, I get the PowerPoint presentations, and you get 2 months away from it, and what happens? You forget what that means. And with the definitions, with the references in this, hopefully this will make your emergency operations plans a little bit stronger. Hopefully it'll deepen your understanding of emergency management. So you can bring all those resources to the table, not only for daily routine type of situations and being safe, but also if you get into the bad type of situation. So yeah, I'm detailed, and I proved it this morning when the doc was talking. So we'll maneuver through all my minutiae, and hopefully you'll find these handouts valuable to you as you go through your normal life and development plan. Okay.
Well.
Okay, our topics today, we're going to talk about emergency management fundamentals. We're going to talk about basic definitions, the working definitions that will help you as you develop your plans and as you develop your procedures to deal with emergencies and so on. We're going to talk about...
I thought you were giving me a cue.
No, here's your cue. We're going to talk about integrated emergency management in a whole community. We'll go into that a great deal because what you have to do is not just develop your plans in isolation, right? You have to bring in information from other stakeholders. You have to incorporate that into your plans and policies. You depend on those people to give you additional resources. And what are resources? People and stuff, right? So you've got your equipment, you've got your supplies, you've got money and so on that you deal with. We're going to talk about the whole community and reaching out to people who sometimes get left out, emergency planning, and then we're going to hit with a short summary of what we want you to take out of this. Okay, the fundamentals of emergency management, like we talked about a few minutes ago, and what will happen is if you start falling asleep, I'm going to do something to you. I don't know what, I'll do something to you, okay? First off, what is emergency management? We talk about it, hear about it all the time, and sometimes it just gets to be this vague type of reference that's really sure of what it means. What it means is the idea of creating frameworks so that you can reduce your vulnerability to any types of hazards, threats, and so on.
It just
Susan's
switched.
messing with me on purpose.
Yes. No, it flipped over, Robert's.
Okay. So I'm going to keep moving through. You've got your slides in front of you so that we can proceed with what's working. But anyway, what you see on slide number 4 is this idea of creating a framework. And what does creating a framework mean? That means that what you are doing is giving yourself basic guides and guidelines about how to respond and so on. So that's what we're talking about with this framework. And again, what we're talking about is reducing vulnerabilities that you may have in terms of the types of risks that you face in your individual facilities and such. You want to be prepared, organized, coordinated, and so on, so that you can bring all the players into there as you need. Now, emergency, we know pretty much what that means when we reference that. It's a lot of times what's beyond the pale of routine. But management is what we do every day, right? In our personal lives, in our facilities, and wherever we are, in the church or whatever. And basically what management in business and organizations is, it's a function that coordinates the efforts of people to accomplish goals and objectives, right? All of us understand and work through that and know it. And it's using available resources that we have at our control and our fingertips. And that's efficiently and effective use of those resources, right? So when you start talking about people and so on, you want to make sure that you're effective and efficient. That's been throughout the management philosophy. In terms of definitions, emergency management is the organized analysis, planning, assignment of available resources, again, to recover, respond, prevent, protect, prepare, and mitigate against emergencies, right? And that's the continual theme that you hear throughout NIMS and throughout the National Preparedness Goal and so on. And I'll hit hard on those every time we talk about it. And you can remember those, that they're basic, and it approaches handling emergencies from every possible perspective. Then what we got is the idea of emergency. What we talk about in public safety and what we talk about in general terms in government is dealing with emergencies. A lot of references to that, right? It can be a routine type thing. In medicine, how often do you deal with emergencies, which you classify as emergencies in your facilities? Pretty often, right? That can be a very, very routine type thing. And from our perspective, it's normally handled by our respective organizations and institutions, right? Kind of routine. That sets the stage for what we're talking about here. But as we move through and we start looking at federal definitions of what's going on, you'll see somewhat of a difference. The disaster, and it's a dangerous event that you think about in terms of catastrophic terms, right? How often do we see disasters in our own lives here regionally? Very, very few times, right? And if you're the victim, of course it's disastrous to you. But in terms of what's classified nationally as a disaster, fortunately, we've been blessed in a lot of different ways. So what it does is it causes that idea of severe human damage, economic loss, a disruption of your idea of routine and normalcy, right? So set the stage in your minds with that and think about the kinds of things that we're expected to be prepared for if we have this disastrous type of situation. The capability of being able to fall in to whatever the motion is of government so that people are being protected. Everyone putting their resources together to return to normalcy. In that regard, what we look at are the hazards that we have to deal with. And hazards are the dangerous events or circumstances that we have some risk involved in. Now, we can talk about a tsunami, right? Sometimes you hear, are you a tsunami recognized community and so on. But keep in mind, what you look at in terms of your risk is your probability. What's our probability of a tsunami versus flooding and hurricanes? It's pretty slight, right? So think about the definitions in that regard. The emergency manager's role, everybody says, well, what does this guy do? Do they respond to emergencies on the street? Most often not. Our role, our strength of what we're there for is the idea of coordinating the resources that are available, making sure people are talking to each other, and doing the important stuff. What do you think the most important thing is? Huh? Communication. And when you formalize communication, what do you have that you develop? A plan. The plan that tells people what resources are going to come to bear on a particular type of situation, making sure that the people are talking together, making sure that people understand what their roles and responsibilities and accountabilities are during a bad situation. So the question is, can you write a plan and then stick it on the shelf and blow off the dust and something's about to happen? No. So these that you take out of here today in terms of preparedness is planning, training. You got to train to your plan, and then exercise, making sure that that plan is realistic and workable. Those are the big three that you have to work with. Making sure that if you expect the police department to establish a perimeter around your facility, that you communicate with the people in that police department, right? That they can tell you that you'll have those resources in given types of circumstances. If you're relying on hospital resources, making sure that in fact, if you write in your plan, that hospital can dedicate those resources. And how do you do that? Memorandums of understanding, memorandums of agreement. There's formalized agreements so that if something happens, goes wrong, and they look at you as the emergency manager, the creator of the plan, and say, well, your plan says that we're going to get these resources. And you say, check the agreement right here. Making sure there are clear lines of what's going on with those plans. Along with that coordination with emergency management, what do? You bring in all your stakeholders, right? You got police, you got fire, public works, a whole gamut of government that people typically think of. But not just government, non-governmental organizations, the voluntary resources that we have from all aspects of our community. Business, wonderful source for all of us in what we do, not only in normal terms, but in routine terms, right? Lots of resources available there if you develop those relationships. And our citizens. Very, very important to all of us. Because if you have citizen preparedness, what does that do to help you and your facilities? If you have resident preparedness or if you have family preparedness, that takes the load off of it. And that's what we want to do. Not only that, but with your employees. If your employees are prepared, it takes the load off of you, right? They can come to work. They can focus on their jobs, do what they got to do without worrying but so much about what's going on at home and having a lot of gaps in thought. Okay, we talk about principles of emergency management. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of color here to do some light up if you were starting to fade off. So these are the 8 principles that are so important to emergency management. Gives us guidance in our work. Will give you guidance as you go through developing your plans and doing your daily operations and so on. And I've got them listed with a little bit of a definition on the next page. First, you're looking at making sure that you're comprehensive, right? You don't want to just look at a single type of event, such as a hurricane, because what do you want out of your emergency management philosophy, out of your emergency operations plan? The key is all hazards, right? You have a framework. You want to have that general framework that people can follow to adapt to all hazards, have the general guidelines, the accountability, responsibility, and so on, so that people know how things are supposed to evolve, what they're supposed to do, and why they're supposed to do it. You want to be progressive, and another way of that, to look at that, is the idea of being proactive, right? Anticipate what the problem is. Develop the policies and procedures that you need that are going to answer the threat that you may encounter. Make sure that your people are trained in advance and so on. It's risk-driven, like we talked about before. You may not want to focus a whole bunch of resources, annexes, and so on a risk that's not, and a threat that's not probable to happen within your area of accountability. You want to make sure that it's integrated, and that is making sure that you bring in all levels of government, all portions of the population, and it's woven into a total and complete plan. You want to make sure that it's collaborative, and that means that you've got people from all walks of life who can come together, work together, develop relationships and networks to bring to bear if you have a challenge within your organization, within your institution. And you want to make sure that it's coordinated. The worst examples that I've seen of emergency failure is when people have not coordinated together. That is the key role that you serve as an emergency manager, and that's what emergency management is all about. Even if you don't have direct responsibility, even if you're a manager, even if you're an employee or you're some type of general provider, you have a role in emergency management. And you have to contribute, you have to orchestrate that working together in those partnerships. You have to be flexible, right? You can't be this solid type of person that's locked into a single type of situation. And you have to be professional, and that's what emergency management is striving for. There are university degrees available in it. There are organizations, all of the things that go into the professional movement that people are dealing with. Now, integrated emergency management and whole community. When you first look at that, you may say integrated emergency management. Started developing in the 1980s, right? Well, we normally think of a benchmark is 2001. But this started back in the 1980s when people recognized that it's a key portion of making sure that everybody's pulled together, all levels of government, all communities and so on, dealing with disasters of any type, any size, and so on. The general terms to pull that together. And making sure that everybody understands that emergency management is a culture, right? It's not just a methodology. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of living. It embodies safety. It involves coordination, collaboration, the partnerships that all of us work for. And it's not just for disasters. Like I said a minute, it has to be routine. It has to be lived. Now, what it talks about is increasing your capability, and that increase of capability, right? If you're capable of doing something, it increases your capacity, right? You're able to deal with more things in a better way, more efficient, like we were talking about with management a little bit earlier. You've got those networks that you're establishing through relationships, the partnerships. You've got coordination, communication across all the lines, pulling together the best that you can have with all of the resources and talents throughout your community. You're doing what? The big three with preparedness. You're planning, you're training, you're exercising, and then what? As necessary, you go back and improve the plans that you've got. And you're looking at your big picture. And this is good for one person dealing with life, but it's also good for any organization that's trying to accomplish this idea of safety and emergency management as a culture. Looking at a whole community, everybody says, well, what's a whole community? It's bringing everybody to bear to do what they need to do. What you see is a listing of the individuals and households. What is the number one thing that we want people to do as individuals when we're talking about emergency management, disaster management, and so on? Be ready, right? Ready.gov. We're talking about Ready Hampton Roads. We're talking about the whole gamut of resources that you can utilize so that you can be independent, better able to deal with the disaster. What are some of the things that are advocated with that? And you said it a little bit a minute ago. Go kids, right? Be ready to move out if you got to move out from your home, or have a go get your car if you don't get a chance to go home. Have your families ready. Have a supply of food, right? And people will say, well, how do I have 5 days of food? Well, you don't. When you have an emergency, you don't have 5-course meals, right? You have sustenance, right? So what's going to keep you going? Is it granola bars? Is it applesauce? Whatever you can muster together to keep you going. Water. You don't bring a whole enough water to take a whole bath and everything, right? Sustenance. Making sure you can live. Making sure you can survive. Meds. The whole gamut. Be ready. Be ready to move out from your house. Be ready to move ahead in your car. If you're at work, things go bad. You got to evacuate. Be ready, right? And clothing. Spare clothing. Do you take your whole closet? No, you don't take your whole closet. Socks, underwear, the stuff that you need to survive if things get bad enough. So that's what the government is advocating. You got your private and non-private people that are also contributing to the overall situation. Community envy, all levels of government, the same things we're talking about before with the collaboration and partnerships. So the whole community is named by which residents, emergency management practitioners, all the people enumerated on the previous slide come together to collectively understand what the needs are of the community and determine the best ways to organize, strengthen assets, capacity, capabilities, and so on to meet the needs of any emergency. And what does that do along the way when you do those types of things? It makes you better in your normal and routine life. So emergency managers, as emergency managers in your organization, you need to engage the whole community. And that includes people that speak different languages. It can be people who come from diverse cultures that have to be encouraged to trust you as the emergency manager. People that are all ages, reaching into schools, reaching into your senior populations like me. People who have disabilities or other access or functional needs. Come on, smile, that was a joke. And are traditionally underrepresented in civic government. Right? Take the time. They have answers to questions that we haven't been able to answer for a long, long period of time. Then we look at the private sector. Private sector plays a key role in everything we do. We depend on them to return to normalcy, right? For power, opening the stores so we can have food, and so on. Making sure that we have the resources, but in terms of equipment and supplies, to have that normal life that we all want to return to when things go bad. Who lost power during this bill? Everybody in here virtually, right? So that was something that we tried, strive to get to a point where we returned to that normalcy, where we could sleep, where we could eat and cook and take care of ourselves, because we all want to be independent and take care of ourselves. So understand your businesses, develop those relationships. They are so important. Nonprofits, what will we do with that? American Red Cross. There are hundreds of people who step up to volunteer. They're on a mission to do the things that are right for our communities. What they do is they take the time. They're focused they take their energies toward that cause, and they perfect it. How much have we learned from nonprofits, from people who have kick-started themselves to learn about issues and come up with solutions? And whole community role in EM, and you look at each one of these and you see how important they can be. We're looking at making sure that we reduce hazards. We're looking at developing a preparedness plan. What do you do after you develop your plan? You train it, you exercise it, right? Remember that, that's the key thing. You prepare for that disaster supply kit. You monitor emergency communications. Be it television, be it radio, be it text opportunities, whatever it is. You look at your volunteer organizations like we talked about, and you rely on good emergency response training like what FEMA offers. Emergency planning is everybody's business. You can't get away from it. And what you see is the idea of a national planning system that I'm going to rush through, because it gets to be something that you can refer to later, but the idea of the national planning system exists.
That's the cake. They're calling that the cake.
Okay, they call it the cake.
I told you.
Okay, planning principles. And we talked about this. It has to be collaborative. It has to have whole community involved in it. It has to be logical, analytical problem solving. It has to be flexible. It has to be, you have to understand that it's not written in stone. You have to modify, change, and move on. And it manages risk through process. And we'll talk about the rest. The emergency operations plan, everybody got one? Okay, everybody's got one. They know the importance of it. You've got to have whole community and total involvement in it. You have to look at the threat and risk that we talked about a few minutes ago, and it's listed as SIRA under the policies, procedures of the U.S. government, but you look at threats and risk. In the planning roles and authority, keep in mind it's the law. And we're going to thumb through these real quick, and I'm going to hit some highlights. Local government is where everything begins and everything ends. It has direct responsibility, boots on the ground, relationships that we can deal with. State government, what you see is the Virginia Department of Emergency Management is the appointed agency by the governor to deal with things. The same as your emergency manager within local government. And then up to the next rung of the ladder with the feds, we have FEMA that we deal with most often. As you know, the federal government has a bunch of legal authorities that we work hard with. The Stafford Act is key, because what the Stafford Act does is offer resources and also offers money reimbursements in certain situations that we strive to meet. You'll see government documenting. The emergency is different from what you're talking about with the disaster like we talked about, and I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of detail with that. Keep in mind, I've referenced this for you in case the information is ever pertinent to you in terms of assistance that may come your way. It just depends. President can unilaterally declare an emergency as reimbursable, but a major disaster has to go through certain other rungs, including the request of the government. Okay, we're going to skip major disasters and talk about Presidential Policy Directive 8. And what that does is emphasize this idea of preparedness that we've been talking about. What are the top 3 things with preparedness? Plan, train, and exercise. Keep everything toned up so that you can properly respond and take advantage of the information that you have. And what it does is link together the national preparedness goal, the national preparedness system, and the idea of whole community, and the preparedness report. Next, national preparedness goal, you see 5 mission areas listed there that parallel what we talked about in the middle, with prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. You see that covers 3 portions of any response: pre-incident, incident, and post-incident. Looking at recovery under post-incident, that's most important. And pre-incident, all our jobs is to prevent any type of emergency or disaster. Mission areas are listed right here. They're very intuitive, so I'm not going to hit hard on that. But if you need that for your plan, it's listed. You have 3 core capabilities that cross over the 5 mission areas. Keep in mind there are 31 mission areas that fit into each one of these areas. NIMS, National Incident Management System, that was the drive with National Homeland Security Directive 5 that added emphasis into everything we do, including ICS, including multi-agency coordination, public information under command and management, and the other things that we've been talking about in terms of preparedness and keeping your plans updated and so on. Preparedness, as I said, is the structure, it's the core of everything that we do. And you know the 3 components of that, and that's what? Train, and exercise. Good. And it's all inclusive, it's whole community. Okay, preparedness, your emergency operations plan is critical, and you see why. Assignments, responsibilities, lines of authority, resources that are needed, mitigation steps, and so on. You recruit and train the right people. You identify your facilities. You look at contingencies in case your facilities get wiped out, right? Where are you going to take your patients and your people? So look at all of those things, make sure it's communicated among everybody, and bring in your private partners to help you with those decisions and with the contingencies. Families, again, it's critical that everyone be ready. It's critical that your employees be ready as well as yourself. Don't be thinking about whether you got your insurance papers at home lined up when you get in the middle of that emergency. Know in your heart, trust that you have everything in order at home so you can do your job at work. And your emergency response training opportunities. There's certain programs available in each one of our jurisdictions that you can participate with, train with, and get a greater understanding of emergency management. There are police and fire citizen academies where you can actually work with the first responders to learn more about how they plan, how they respond, and so on. And you develop wonderful relationships in that manner. You have the Emergency Management Institute that has online training that most of this information came from, and the Department of Emergency Management, ongoing coursework and assistance with planning and so on. The summary: contact your local emergency management office for additional help with your planning, review of your plans, any assistance that you need in terms of awareness. Make sure that you're contributing our integrated emergency management cultures and the idea of whole community. Sorry I had to rush, but it's information that you have in your hands now, and I hope it's helpful to you. Thank you very much. Nobody told me.
Do we have any questions? Any questions?
Does anybody have any questions?
That's on. I don't know, I'm going there.
Okay, if you all don't mind just taking a moment to fill out your evaluation. We're going right into a break, and we are going to pull a few raffle prizes, so if you want to stick around for just a minute, then we'll have about a 10-minute break. We have until 11:10.